PNND is interviewing Mr. Saber Chowdhury, who just got elected the President of the Inter-Parliamentary Union. Hello, Mr. Chowdhury. In March 2014, the IPU adopted a resolution on the contribution of parliaments on the achievement of nuclear weapons-free world. In your election campaign, you spoke about the role of implementation of IPU resolutions in national parliaments. What's the role of IPU in this process?
See, IPU as an organization of global parliaments basically puts together best practices. We don't try to be prescriptive. We don't say what action each country should be following, but we bring together what other countries have done. And the advantage of this is that the learning curve is much shorter. You don't have to experiment, you don't have to go through the whole process again. But for the agenda to move forward, and the nuclear weapons-free world agenda, I think, is one of the most important agendas. Ownership of the national parliaments is very important. So we can come up with best practices in various parts of the world, and then the parliaments have to move the agenda in their own countries. So it's a bit of a bottom-up and a top-down approach. So I think it's absolutely critical that national parliaments take back to their own countries what we are talking about as best policies at the global level.
In your country, Bangladesh, you introduced a law on prohibition of nuclear weapons. Can you tell us more about it?
We have actually introduced the bill. It's currently in Parliament. It hasn't yet been enacted. But the idea is that we try and establish Bangladesh as a nuclear weapons-free country. There are various parts of the world which are quite volatile. South Asia also, we have challenges as far as the nuclear dimension is concerned. There are countries in the region who have nuclear capability. So our concept was, I think, similar to the one in Mongolia, where they talked about a nuclear weapons-free country. So once you become a nuclear weapons-free country, you can think of linking up to other countries in the area, in the region, and have a nuclear weapons-free zone that includes Bangladesh in the future. But first we have to do it at our country level. And I think what's interesting about that legislation is we talk about the consequences, and we talk about compensation, about if Bangladesh is a victim of a nuclear exchange between two countries. So Bangladesh is a third country. What about the damage to the country of Bangladesh, the economy, the ecology, the people? And some sort of a compensation mechanism has to be in place. So I think this was a new element in our legislation, talking about compensation. Hopefully we will never need compensation because these instances will not happen. But I think it's an additional deterrent and an additional point for nuclear weapon states to keep in mind.
You have been a co-president of PNND for a couple of years. At the last PNND assembly in Washington, you proposed a PNND membership growth campaign. How many parliamentarians would you like to reach, and how do you think this could influence the global political will for nuclear disarmament?
You see, you have to look at where parliamentarians fit in the overall scheme of things. Parliamentarians or parliaments are not substitute for governments. Governments do their work, but parliamentarians in many cases exercise control over the work that the governments do in terms of allocating fund for budget, in terms of policy oversight, in terms of making sure that the taxpayers' money is being spent in the right direction and the people get value for money. It's very, very important that parliamentarians play that role in terms of generating support for the agenda. You see, if you look at the success we have had, let's say when you come to the the landmines and the other issues, there was always a popular participation in those issues. People got involved. And the moment people get involved, it becomes very easy for parliamentarians to drive the agenda. Governments also take notice that no, this is an issue which is important to the people. So the government's position cannot be out of sync with what the people are thinking.
You have been active in many areas, for example, human rights, environment or sports. Do you think that organizations from these areas can play a role in nuclear disarmament?
Absolutely. You see, when the UN Secretary General put forward his 5-point action plan and he reached out to all the parliaments, Bangladesh was one of the parliaments that actually strongly supported it. And we had a discussion, we took a resolution in our parliament. And what is interesting in that resolution is that we make a linkage between a nuclear weapons-free world and the opportunity cost, how much money we will save, and how this money can then be used for development. So if you talk about climate change, you talk about sustainable development, you talk about the least developed countries, we all need resources, we need finance. And I think if we can move away from this nuclear obsession, is how I would call it, then it frees up resources for your development purposes.
The Inter-Parliamentary Union has 166 member countries, and of the nuclear weapon states, one is missing, the United States. As the president of IPU, will you take action to invite the USA back into IPU?
Thank you for posing this question. As you rightly said, our membership is now 166. If we look at the total number of countries in the world who have legislatures, parliaments, it's 192. So we need, as IPU, to be universal in our membership. We would like every country to come in. So first is we want to include every country which has a legislature to be a member of the IPU. The second point is the US, and whether you like the US, whether you agree or disagree with their position, it is important to have them in an organization such as the IPU. And in fact, the US was part of the IPU in the past, and then they left. Now I think there is a move, there is a bill in the US Congress to come back to the IPU as far as the US is concerned. And personally, I think it is important that they are a member of the IPU. And as a president, I will continue the ongoing efforts of the IPU to try and bring the USA back to our fold.
Thank you for the interview, Mr. Chowdhury.
Thank you.